Welcome to our next class. We will continue with this demonstration here and review some concepts and look at some new concepts. To begin, you can see that we have a background color in this element and it extends across the width of the page. We also have a background color in these two elements. Your HTML container elements are what are called block level, meaning there is a carriage return or a margin on the top, a carriage return or a margin on the bottom. Notice these links are enclosed with the A or anchor element. That is an inline element. Notice there is no carriage return. Everything goes across. Most of the elements that we work with are block level elements. However, some of them here are inline. We also have an inline span element here. So the block level element will be 100% width of its parent container. At this point, the parent container is the body, meaning that it will be as big as the body. As I move it back and forth, it changes. This is called fluid. Fluid means it automatically adjusts according to the outer container. Fluid is not the same as responsive, which we will learn later, although they do have a lot in common. So let's take a look at our HTML code. Here we have our doc type, our opening HTML, the beginning of our head section, our meta, our title. If we had an external style sheet, this is where it would be coded. And here is our embedded style sheet inside the head section. All of the HTML elements go here, the elements that contain content. There are some elements, such as the style, that belong in the head section. Here we have the header element, which contains an H1 element. Just because they mention the word head, they do not belong in the head section. So notice the text JavaJam is inside the H1 element, as we have seen. Here we see. Notice the element is 100% the width. The H1 is 100% width, not the text. The text is not the H1. The text is inside the H1. This is a very important concept for page layout. If we wanted to center this text, JavaJam Coffee House, inside the H1 level element, I could create a selector. This is an element selector, and this is the text align property. It allows us to set these different values, and I'm going to set it to center. And now we see that it is centered inside the H1 level element. Notice that we did not center the H1. We centered what is inside the H1. The text align property centers text and or images inside a container. That is a very important concept. Okay, notice we have a parent-child relationship. We have the header, and it contains an H1 element, so technically the H1 is a child of header. We also have the body. Nav is a child. Nav also is a parent of the A elements. We also have the main element, which here contains a UL child, some breaks, a div, etc. So the layout of the HTML document constitutes a parent-child hierarchical relationship, and that's a very important concept. Last week we looked at using ID attributes. The ID attribute, whose value must be unique, can be used to apply CSS. So here I have ID equals home in my HTML document. The syntax for the ID selector is #home. So these are selectors. We have an ID selector and we have element selectors. The element selectors are merely the name of the HTML element. We also have class attributes. This is an HTML attribute. The only purpose is for applying CSS. You can apply the same class multiple times in the same document. So here the syntax begins with a period. This is a class selector. This is a class selector. We also have what are called descendant selectors. A descendant selector is a selector that is identified by its parent-child relationship. Supposing I wanted to access this span element. Now granted, the span already has an italic, but I don't necessarily want to add the style there or create another class. I could access this span by using its parent div container. So let's take a look at how we would create a descendant selector. If I wanted the text in this span to be red, and I always like testing by using colors, it works well. This is a descendant selector. Descendant selectors are space separated. The style is applied to the rightmost element or selector. What this is saying, it's saying that apply this style rule to this span that is a descendant of div. A descendant is a child, it could also be a grandchild. Here we will apply that style. So if I were to save this, and if I were to look, we see it is red. It's also italic because we have this class. Styles can be applied from many different sources under different conditions. And there is an order of precedence, and that is called the cascade. The order essentially says that inline styles have first precedence, first priority, then come IDs, then come classes, then come descendant selectors. An embedded style will take precedence over an external style. So this is something to be aware of, because there are times when you may be wondering why something doesn't work, and it's not because your syntax is incorrect, it's because your logic, your understanding is not right. Now, let's take a look at this span again. I have a class equals italic, and we have the descendant. Now, both of these apply. Styles from here apply, and also styles from my descendant selector apply. So ultimately, styles can come in from other sources. They can be additive. Supposing I were to put a color in this italic style here, and I'm going to say color navy. Now, we have the color property being applied to this class and the color property being applied to this descendant selector. In the event of a conflict, which rule takes precedence? And this is really where the cascade comes in. The cascade comes in the event of a conflict for a competing value for the same property. As I said earlier, everything is additive. So let's save this. And remember, the color was red. Will it stay red, or will it become navy? Notice it became navy. Why? Because literally, this style is closer. So if you want to just remember, the closest rule takes precedence. That will help you. Let's take a look at our H1 element again. And what I would like to do is I would like to show you another very nice property, and that's the text shadow property. The text shadow property takes a horizontal offset, a vertical offset, an optional blur, and the color. So if we were to save this, and I like exaggerating things and making them ugly just so that you can see them. Notice the horizontal offset is over on the X, the vertical offset is down on the Y, and there's the blur. Now that doesn't look very pretty. This is a very nice property though. So if we were to go back and to change this to something more subtle, now we have a very nice drop shadow. So this is a very nice property. Supposing we wanted to center this whole page, which is the convention on the web. Most websites do not fill up the whole page. They are at a fixed, what is called a fixed width. In order to do this, I need to enclose everything inside an element, and I am just using a generic multi-purpose div. And I'm going to uniquely give it an ID equals wrapper. And you will see that developers use this word wrapper. They also use the word outer commonly to indicate the outer container. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the width property to this. I'm going to make this 960 pixels. This is a very common fixed width unit that a lot of developers use for a traditional desktop website. You can make it a percent, but percent sometimes can get too wide on a very large screen. Now I need to zoom out so that you can see this. Notice everything has a width, and I can see that because I have white on the side here. Everything by default is left aligned. If I wanted to center this in the center of the page, I would not use text align. Text align centers what is inside the container. The way that you center a container is by setting the left and right margins to auto. And this is just the way it's done. Auto means it automatically will fill up the margin. Now notice it's in the middle, and here again, as I get bigger and smaller, those margins automatically adjust. So this is what you need. You need a width, and you need the right and left margin set to auto. We will cover the margin property later. This is how you center a container. How you center text inside the container is text align. So please make a note of the differences here. Supposing I were to apply a background color to my body. I'm going to make it black. Notice everything is black, and I can't even see my text. Why? Because the body is the top level parent container, and if I apply a background color to it, it will be inherited unless there is a conflict. Notice we had previously set the background color to yellow, so the Cascade rule prevents black from being applied. Yellow will take precedence. Here we have a class setting the background to silver. That will take precedence over the inherited. Supposing we wanted to make all this white inside, how would we do that? Remember, we now have our wrapper container, so by coding in the background color here, and I'll use a hexadecimal value. You can use the hexadecimal shortcuts when the first two characters are the same, and the next first two characters are the same, and the next first two characters are the same. You can reduce it to just one, but it has to exist for all three. We also see some other things. We see that things are pretty close to the edge. So we will be learning as we go through this class how to make adjustments on all of this.